There he is. How's it going, Coop?
Doing good, doing good. How about you?
Fantastic. I'm about to chat about one of my favorite genres of video games with some amazing gents up here. I couldn't be more excited. By the way, last resort, I don't know exactly who we have on the other side of that, but happy to have you up here.
This is Matt. How are you guys?
Hey, Matt, it's always a pleasure. What's going on? Excited to chat with you about zombies and horror and everything Halloween. So really looking forward to this. I'm sure a few people will trickle on in, but anybody who's in the audience right now, if you can do us a quick favor to get some more eyes on this, because this is going to be a fun space. Go over to the bottom right corner. You should see a little comment button down there. Click it, open up the thread for the space, and while you're there, do us a quick favor by liking and retweeting the space, get some more eyes on it, show some support. And we're not going to have an official question section here, but we might just ad hoc or impromptu bring up a couple of good questions. So if you do have an awesome question about horror games, or anything really, Last Resort, Last Remains, anything about Web3 gaming, throw it in there. And if we see it, we're going to keep our eyes on it and answer some questions. So if you want to get our opinion on something, no rewards this time, just pure knowledge, and obviously hearing some awesome opinions from the people up here. So I want to start off really quick with a very light introduction. I'm Guru. You guys have heard me up here plenty of times. I host these spaces for Earn Alliance and Last Remains, and I couldn't be more excited to host this space where I've got Earn Alliance on one side and I got Last Remains on the other. Well, technically I have Last Remains on the other. I have Coop, which is good enough here because he's the CEO and founder of both companies. And I'm also welcomed as well up here by Matt, who is also on behalf of the Last Resort game, which I absolutely love. Yes, I know there is a little bit of similarities between the game name, but let me tell you, they are very different games, and I'll let Matt talk more about that when the time comes. But Coop, if you want to jump in, I know I gave you a little introduction, but if you want to throw any spice on top, and then we'll throw it on over to Matt. And Matt, you can actually give us an introduction of the game as well. So take it away, Coop, and then throw it to Matt when you're done.
Yeah, definitely. So Last Remains, it's been in development for a little over a year now. It's a stealth zombie battle royale. It'll be coming out for early access at the end of the year, and we're going to be having another community playtest this Saturday. So it's been a lot of fun developing it, and hoping everyone else is going to like it.
Take it away, Matt.
And I'll take over then. Yeah, so I'm Matt, I'm CEO and co-founder as well of Last Resort, which is also in the same context, meaning horror, zombies, and all that good stuff. But we're using very different mechanics. We're going more towards the survival, the crafting, the gathering, and strategizing around how you want to build your future in this new world. So it's different as well in terms of camera. We have a top-down view, isometric. It's less focused on skills and it's more focused towards your progression. So I think they're pretty complementary, and I'm happy to be with you guys here because I absolutely love Last Remains as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love the game style that Last Resort is. It reminds me of, I'm a huge survival and strategy fan, so it's definitely right up my alley. And I feel like where Last Remains get me sweating for completely different reasons, one of which is the fact that I am not a young pup with crazy reflexes and mechanics anymore. Last Resort definitely feels like something I can enjoy playing a little bit more casually in comparison. So I absolutely love the game, and I can't wait to actually get my hands on it and play a little bit more as you guys continue to develop. Speaking of development, though, I want to take a quick moment to talk about anything, whether it be big developments, big updates, any current or big campaigns that are going on. I myself just want to throw a little personal stitch out there, which is that we currently have the equipment mint happening for Last Remains. So this is huge, actually massive moment for us because when it comes to Last Remains, the primary tokenized elements in the game are the characters, which are battle passes with, slightly added perks on top of them. And they are NFTs that we distributed about 6 months ago. So it has been a little while. And the next part is, of course, the equipment. So the equipment is a very big part of Last Remains, and there is so much of it now going out, being minted by the community, and then later on for the public. So you guys, if you have not had an opportunity yet to at least stay up to date on what's happening, definitely go and check it out. You can find Last Remains from my profile, Earn Alliance, or Coop's as well. So jump in there. There is a tag there, and we'll be able to have you guys updated on everything Last Remains through both the Twitter, and if you have a chance, jump into the Discord too, because I know Jose's in there and he is very informative about everything that's going on. But yeah, had to throw that little bit in there because that's a big moment for us in Last Remains. But Matt, don't know if you have anything big that just happened, is currently happening, or is coming soon, but would love to give you the stage to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we are a little bit behind in terms of development schedule compared to what Last Remains is at right now. So what we had is our first play to mint, so that would correspond to what you had maybe six months ago, and that went really well. We were very happy with the participation. We also ran a cash tournament, and people just played a humongous time on the game, and that was really fun. And we got some good feedback to improve it, and overall it went really well, both in terms of the distribution of NFTs, but also for the game itself. So we extending it a little bit. We're extending it a little bit now. Ultra is also listing the game right now, so that's something that's happening. For our community, we're having a special event that will probably go on Saturday as well, with a different version just for Halloween. It's a bit of decoration and some fun gameplay there. So that should be fun. And then we're focusing on the next version. So we're doing a public development schedule, and every 2 to 3 months we have a new version, and the next version will be in December. So we're focusing on the new features there. But as a sneak peek, we'll have one of those new features in the Halloween build. So stay tuned for that. It should be adding some stress to your journey.
Hey, I gotta say, there's nothing behind about that. You guys are absolutely killing it, so keep it up. I'm so excited to hear that you guys are putting as much thought and effort into developing as, I believe that a game should be in this space. So I'm gonna have to check it out a little bit myself as well, because I absolutely love being able to be part of projects that have this kind of momentum in them, especially going into the next year. The next year, I think, is going to be so huge for Web3 gaming. But hey, let's get this started. We had a little bit of a chance to chat about games. Coop, if you have anything you want to just throw on about Last Remains before we get going, and then we can jump right into the conversational part of this. So if you have nothing to say, feel free to just let me know, and we'll just carry on into the next bit.
Yeah, man. I think you covered it really well, so let's keep going.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to start with something really fun, and I'm actually really excited. The way we'll do this, I'm going to ask you guys the questions, and then I might answer afterwards as well, because I don't want to just be the host of this. I'd love to be a part of this, but we're going to talk about horror genre, and pop culture, gaming, etc. And I hope you guys are ready to chat about this, because I am an absolute nerd when it comes to horror. I'm telling you, it is nuts how many horror games I've played. So I actually want to start with a really awesome icebreaker here and just ask you guys, maybe we'll start with Coop, because Matt, we just had something from you. Coop, anything in particular you might have experienced firsthand, like as a person, as an individual, that was really scary that you want to share before? Anything at all?
Oh man, I didn't even think about this. But scary. No, I mean, I'm like kind of getting like some childhood memories when there's.
Were you afraid of the dark?
No, not at all. Definitely not afraid of the dark. But I do sleep with a night lamp. But just kidding. Yeah, I think I went to like this haunted, burnt down hotel when I was a kid. That was pretty scary. Yeah, definitely remember that.
Yeah, that sounds honestly like it could be very scary, especially as a kid. What about you, Matt? Anything in particular? Any really scary experiences you've had? Maybe curated, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so I was thinking of that and thinking if I had anything spooky. So I lived for a while in the French Quarter. So this place is kind of like, it's got a spooky vibe in it. The cemetery is right there. New Orleans in the US, and it's got like all the voodoo vibe going on. So it was more of a spooky time. And then in terms of scary situations, I'm a skydiver, and so I've had a cutaway. And this is when your first parachute doesn't work, and you have very little time to do the operation to change to the other one. So that could go in the scary category, even though it's not spooky per se.
That counts. Let me tell you, that counts. I've only ever gone skydiving once, and if I gotta say,
you were happy that the parachute opened.
I was very happy. Everything went very smoothly, and I was like, nice. I got that off the bucket list. I could imagine just how scary that is. That's crazy. I'm happy you're okay though, obviously, because
Oh yeah,
I think
it's a normal part of the sport. Do it long enough and it will happen.
yeah, I mean, fair enough, fair enough. That's why they always got backups and everything. No, that's interesting. I like that. For me, the only really big things that I've done a few things, of course, and I've had a couple scary athletic experiences, kind of like you, Matt. But I think really, I just had a really curated journey one time. It was like a paranormal journey out to a insane asylum, an abandoned one that was very popular in where the area where I grew up. And let me tell you, I was pretty young at the time. It was terrifying. It was a very, very scary experience. I feel like they went out of their way to probably set some stuff up to make that worse than it needed to be, but it was super spooky. And I just bought into it because there was lore all around where I grew up in. So when you ended up going to do it, it was like it had my skin. I had my hair standing up on the back of my neck. But I realized very soon that I kind of liked that because I jumped into the horror genre, and I have loved horror movies since the first time I ran into one by accident that my parents were watching and couldn't sleep at night, which sucked, by the way. My introduction to horror was definitely very shitty, but once I got past that and I ended up enjoying the series, I fell in love with it. And I think that when it comes down to anything I really, really love, like some of my horror that I love some of the stuff primarily focused around zombies. Like one of my all time favorite series, and I know, guys, it's been blown out of proportion. I will say some of the media about it has been crazy, but I'm a huge fan of the Resident Evil series. I've loved it since the original director's cut. I played it with my older brother. The iconic scene of that zombie turning around at the very first time, I was like, "Whoa!" Like this was nuts. I absolutely loved it. Played through the second game, which was wild. The third game, had the nemesis following you all the way around. I've loved Resident Evil my whole life. So I'm just going to quickly say that for me, one of my favorite horror IPs, at least as a movie and a game series, has definitely been the Resident Evil series, and very suitable. It's very zombie focused. I'm building a zombie focused game now. Who'd have thought? But I do want to give a quick shout out too, as far as the games go. If any of you guys know this series, I have so much respect for you because it's a very unique series. And it's called the Dark Pictures Anthology series. And they have tons of games. They release one pretty much every single year, from Dusk Till Dawn, Man of Medan. Recently, they had like House of Ashes and The Devil in Me. Awesome, awesome games. It's very much a cinematic experience where you go through and you make decisions, and every decision matters. But they're very scary and very well written. So I wanted to start that one off because, I told you guys I was such a nerd when it comes to horror games. But Coop, what about you? If you had to give a shout out maybe to a movie and a game, I would love to hear what it is. What's your favorite horror movie and what's your favorite horror game or potentially series?
I think The Ring was definitely one of those that just how that girl would make that weird noise and crawl over the ceiling and stuff.
Dude,
Yeah.
GG.
That's it, man. That's it. And that TV made me look at TVs very differently for a long time. So shout out to that. And then in terms of a game, I mean, somebody reminded me of Counter-Strike 1.3, like on the 56K modem today. So I'm thinking about Counter-Strike today.
Counter-Strike today. I love it. I love it. Okay, that's great. What about you, Matt? I'd love to hear a little bit more from you. What's your take on this?
Well, to me, the scarier one is always the first one, right? Because it feels so real in the movies. So for me, that was probably the first Scream movie or the first Saw. I think the first Saw is really the one that stuck with me because it was like mixing psychology with like big gore scene in a proportion that fit for me, and it was really, really scary, and you kind of like on the edge of your seat even though there was not that much happening at any given time. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it kind of redefined the genre in a way. So that's for movies, and then for games, I'm really with you on the Resident Evil side of things. And I didn't try it yet, but I saw that they created a VR version of it, and I think that would be an awesome platform. And knowing how they can keep you engaged and like being this super intense immersion, even though you're on the screen, I can only imagine what VR would do.
Yeah, I've got to say, there, unfortunately so, because I think some of it's unwarranted, but there's been a lot of mixed and like controversial opinions on some of the newer Resident Evil games that have come out. People are like, it's too over the top, it's too this, it's too that. I have an unpopular opinion. I think they've been fantastic, and I like, somebody who's been around since the beginning. I expect that the genre is going to change, the experience has to change, but I think it's cool. Not everything's going to be a hit for me, but I can say the VR one, and even just the VR experiences, if you have a chance, Matt, watch some of the speed runs of it. It's wild. I've never seen anything more crazy in my life. But yeah, it's definitely something. So okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opinion. By the way, Coop, you brought up The Ring, and it just again gave me shivers down my back. I think that was one of those movies I picked up when I was really young, and it's stuck in my head. There's a few of them that are just absolutely crazy. And I mean, games as well. I think another game that I want to give a really quick shout out to, because it also defined a genre, is the Silent Hill series. I think Silent Hill is a game that is just so iconic in the horror genre. It has developed so much. There has been so much inspiration that's come from it to develop so many games afterwards, especially in the psychological horror series, which is unreal these days with how good graphics are. But I think this is a really good point to jump into the next little bit here, because I think I talk to people sometimes, and I'm sure you guys have gotten the same feedback from some people. People who are not into horror, whether it be movies, games, etc. When I tell them that I like horror, they're just so confused, right? Some people just cannot understand what the appeal is in horror. And I think maybe when it comes down to movies, some people like it, or games, some people like it for different reasons. But I think in general, the appeal of horror is something that people are very curious about. So I'd love to get your guys' opinion of this. Like, first off, like taking it away from what your inspiration for the game is, just directly on the genre itself, what what really is the appeal of horror in your opinion? Why do you think people like this? What are some of the reasons why this appeals to people? And potentially, if you want to tie it in a little bit, what are some of the things that you think actually makes a horror movie or game, more particularly game, I'd love to hear, successful? Like, what kind of things do you believe that you need to do right, or that people look for in a good horror game that makes it good? So, a lot there to unpack. I'll give you guys the opportunity to. Maybe, Matt, if you want to start first this time, and then we'll jump over to Coop. I'd love to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is the intense emotions, right? So if you're building a racing game, right, you want to convey the intense emotion that at any time you could crash, and if you do crash, it will have an impact on your result. And that works for this case of like movies or games where you have racing. But in the case of the horror, it's yourself. So it's like it sets you in a setting that you can imagine, and you can kind of like transcend the screen and get into your character and feel like you're under pressure, feel like you're fear for your life, basically. So it's like an adrenaline rush that is different from the racing one, that is different from other genres, but it is very important to have an experience, because in the end, we're doing multimedia projects and interactive ones. So we have this ability to go further in how much people get into our experiences. So I think that's why the horror genre is really interesting. And then in our case, what we really need to nail is a risk reward mechanics. So you really have to feel like, hey, like I really want this, and if I die now, I won't get it, and I will have to work my way towards it again. So it's really this balance of I always feel vulnerable, and I think that's kind of what the horror genre is about, is like exposing yourself to feeling vulnerable.
Well said. Really like that point of view. Coop, what do you have to say on that? I'd love to hear your point of view or your take on this.
Man, I mean, that was so good. I'm like, dang, that was deep. I loved it. Yeah, for me, I think in terms of the horror genre, I think it has to do with sound as well. I think sound goes pretty big, and all it takes is a corner and a loud noise, and just something around the corner that you just don't know, and your imagination just kind of goes off thinking what could it be, and then it eventually reveals itself. Yeah, that's that stuff's scary. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
how I kind of look at it.
Audio is such a big part of it. I played a game once that was not even that great of graphics, but it was just me having to. I guess I'm supposed to investigate this abandoned hospital, and you have to walk around. And I'm telling you, the audio in that made me so scared I could not even finish the game. It was just too late. I'm like, I'm gonna book this for another day. I'm not ready for this. I jumped into it thinking it was gonna be easy. It was not. But Matt, I love how you jump into the intense emotions, and I think it's spoken very much like a veteran of the genre too. So I can appreciate that. You bring something up that's really, really valid, and I think the emotions are such a big part of it. There's so many different ways that people curate that, right? Like there's the tenseness, there's the thrill, there's the jump scare. Like there's so much. There's even just the horror, like the terror. I know that there's sometimes people will just put together this really intense experience that just really makes you feel afraid, which I think most people actually look at as like a very like perfectly rounded way to create horror. I know that Jordan Peele gets a lot of appreciation for the way that he can do that because it's hard. It's very hard to create an experience that puts somebody into a feeling of terror. But I think that when it comes to games, and this is actually a really funny thing, it was a point we had up on here, and I know that we talk about creating that emotion, making a scary game. But you've also probably heard the phrases of too much. I think a very famous phrase that we hear in horror, whether it be games or movies, is, oh, it's just too many jump scares. Like, you know, the good old Insidious vibe where it's like everything is just a really loud noise and a scary thing happening. And I'm like, okay, it's great, but definitely it can feel a little too intense and almost repetitive and kind of desensitize you a little bit, right? And I think that this is something that horror enthusiasts will often quote as like a lower quality aspect of a game. It's like, you're just relying on jump scares. You can't, you can't curate an environment that makes me feel tense, that makes me feel that suspense. And I think that that's a really important thing that both of our games actually are working towards being able to make, because you do want people to feel immersed and you want people to have those emotions, but you want to make sure that you do it in a quality way. You want to make it feel more realistic. You want to not desensitize them. And if you just push them away with jump scares or anything of the sort, it might just be a little too much. So I think what I want to ask you guys, and Coop, I'd love to hear your opinion of this first, is do you think there is such thing as too scary? Like I've played a couple games where I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to finish. I'm like, I'm gonna go watch a well-known horror YouTuber finish this game because my heart rate is through the roof and I'm chilling. So I wanted to know, Coop, do you think there's such thing as too scary or too gory or anything of the sort, or do you think like the sky's the limit when it comes to this stuff?
I think the sky's the limit. I will say though, Last Remains, when I first started seeing the animations come out of it, I was thinking that I definitely don't want my kid to be seeing this. That's for sure. And so yeah, I think it's a little bit much and exaggerated. I would say for like the average audience for sure. But I think that's where the game designer really wanted to take it. And but in terms of one time where I needed to stop and turn it off, I must have been like 5 or 6 years old watching Pet Cemetery. And there's this one scene in that one where I just had to just turn it off. And
I think I know the scene.
I don't even want to repeat it, you know? And yeah, so I think that was probably the craziest movie that I had to stop. But when I got older, it just became, just chill.
It became chill, he says. Geez, Coop, I can respect that grit, that armor. I can say there's definitely a few times I've been very, very scared by things. Matt, what about you? I'd love to hear your point of view on this. Do you think there's such thing as too scary? Have you ever had a moment like that?
So I'll say there isn't, and then there is. So in a sense, there isn't, because too scary is what? It's like you manage too successfully to scare your audience when that's what you were looking at doing. So it doesn't really exist, right? So when you were talking about jump scares and everything, if you do it right, it's very intense. And I don't think you can go too far in that intensity, but you're pointing to something right, which is a frequency. So like any progression, you have to be careful. The same with a movie, of course, is you have to be careful not to be always in an intense moment, or the intense moment is now the new normal, and then it doesn't feel as intense anymore. So frequency can go too high, and then intensity not really. However, I think it can go too gore for one reason is I think if it goes too gore, you become a kind of satire of your own genre. So for example, if I talk about Serious Sam Serious Sam is completely a satire, and you have everything exploding and there's blood everywhere, and it's like it's not scary and it couldn't be scary because it's so over the top. And in movies, you could think of Hot Fuzz and this kind of thing. So to me, if you go too gore, you go into a satire. So there is a limit to not going too far. But then in terms of intensity, not really. And in terms of frequency, yeah, same point as you.
Well said, Matt. Well said. We got Jin Kieran up here too, which I know is you're a very big enthusiast of the horror genre. So you have your hand up. Feel free to take the stage. We'd love to hear your point of view on this.
Heck yeah, I feel like I'm fairly qualified to speak on this, considering horror was my main genre for many years. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, you name it, I've probably played it. Now, there is such a thing as too scary. However, it's going to vary from person to person because certain people have fears that other people may not. I have beaten so many different horror games, but there's one that comes to mind that I just cannot bring myself to continue playing, and it's Outlast. A game where the enemies cannot be killed, I can't fight back, all I'm doing is running and hiding, and I still remember what caused me to Alt F4, uninstall, and never come back to that game. I ran from an enemy, I hid under the bed, and I'm like, I'm safe, I'm hiding. They programmed that sucker to literally reach under the bed and drag you out and kill you. So even when I thought I was safe, I was not. And it got to a point where I'm like, okay, well, if I'm never safe and my only option is to just constantly run, that's anxiety induced. I like that's a whole different level of fear, right? Because in a game like Resident Evil, I can fight back. But even within Resident Evil, there was a case where I had to put the game down, and it was Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake. If anybody's familiar with him, you can't kill him either, and he chases you through the entire freaking police precinct. And it kind of caused a panic of, I'm going to run out of ammo. There's nothing I can do about this. It made me feel almost hopeless rather than fearful. So I just gave up. Eventually, I revisited the game. I enabled some hacks. I beat Mr. X, and I continued playing the game. And once I was comfortable with him, because obviously I couldn't die at that point, I went back and played the game without the hacks, and I was like, oh, he's not so bad. So sometimes it's also just an adjustment period. But a game like Outlast, where I just cannot fight back or do anything, and the entire premise is to just constantly be on the edge of your seat in constant anxiety and fear, that's a bit too much for somebody like me that has that type of anxiety. But other people probably love it. It was a really well-known game within the horror communities. They even had a sequel, so there's obviously a very big scale, so to speak, for horror. So I think the sky is the limit, but you also have to understand that there's probably a large portion of your audience that if you go too far, that may not be able to complete your game, or it may not be initially well received until people kind of adjusted and find out how to deal with the various mechanics that your game introduces.
Good point. Good point. You know, your Outlast experience was a point, like a step-by-step almost experience of my Amnesia experience. I remember Amnesia: The Dark Descent was the exact same way. And I knew what I was getting into with Outlast, actually, but I don't like it as much either. I love watching professionals play it and speedrun it, though, because it makes me just enjoy the fact that they are absolutely pub stomping all of these bullying NPCs that are in that game. Because, yeah, Outlast is terrible. But I like the way that you bring that up. And I think you do bring up a really good point, Shinkarian, is that it really does depend on the person. I think there is such thing as too scary, for sure. I've had some games that have been too scary for me, but for completely different reasons. Coop had mentioned audio being such a big point of games. I think for me, audio does make a really big difference, especially in just my desire and ability to play through that game consistently. Like at a certain point, I'll just feel like the intensity's grown so much, my heart rate's through the roof, and I'm like, whew, okay, we're taking a break here. It's a
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
bit too much. Go ahead, Jinkarian, if you had something to say in response.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. A good example is spiders. There's a game, if you're not familiar with it, it's called Grounded. And you're basically, you get shrunk down or something. You're a small human playing in the backyard of your house. And it's not even a horror game. But there's a lot of people I know that would not touch that game because obviously when you get shrunk down as a human, that means the spiders in your backyard are big in comparison. So there were a lot of people with arachnophobia that would not touch that game because of their fear of spiders. And it wasn't even a horror game. So just some food for thought on that.
Yeah, good point. I love Grounded, by the way. I think that game's super fun. I was playing it in my survival phase, where I was going through everything survival, the forest, etc. Which, speaking of which, actually, I'm really curious, Matt, if you want to share a little bit on this. I'd love to hear a bit about your outlook on balancing horror and survival. I know that these obviously go hand in hand, but when it comes down to it, there are a lot of games I think that have been trying to balance that fact. You've got obviously The Forest, very well-known horror survival game. You've got a variety of different games that are similar to it. You've got obviously Zomboid. There's so many different things, right? So I'm curious, what is your take on this? And do you think that there needs to be a nice mix of it? Are you trying to create that with Last Resort? Are you prioritizing the survival or the zombies and the horror? Just food for thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea for us is we are trying to make a game that is a little bit broader audience. So we're not going after too much of the gore side of things, and we're more towards the psychological. But in the sense that it's not meant to do jump scares. It's really meant to put you in situations where you fear for your character, and you're scared you're going to lose what you've been working towards. So it's a bit different. It's less skill based as well. So it's really more about, hey, I'm upset my guy is going to die, or I'm scared my guy is going to die. But we're not going to do jump scare. So this type of situation is not as spooky, but it's meant to be similarly intense, or at least go towards that in as much as possible when you have a further away camera, and less control.
I like that. That's actually, to be honest with you, one of the things that I really loved about Project Zomboid. I don't know if you're probably familiar with it. It was it blew up a bit in popularity. It was a fun game, super simple, very, very basic graphics, but I always got this feeling, at least when I first played it, where I got really attached to my character. I was like, no, I don't want to die, right? And I love how in that game, if you played with people too, and you died and you created a new character, your character was still roaming around as a zombie. It was pretty good. So I can definitely appreciate that sentiment. I think that's a good way to capture it, for sure, and especially in a place like Web3, where people do obviously have that added sense of ownership when it comes to their assets as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess, you know what, honestly, we're still just kind of keeping this in conversation. So I'll just keep bringing up some points and we can keep talking. I do like that we jumped a lot more into the horror genre here. Obviously, Jinkieran, you missed some of the beginning parts of it. We were talking about some of our favorite movies and games, but you jumped in and immediately threw some iconic games up there. Also a huge fan of the Silent Hill series, by the way. Appreciate anybody who appreciates that game series. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I think it's one of the scariest out there, personally. Maybe it's because I was a kid as I grew up with it, but I don't know, man. Silent Hill will always have this shit is next level scary place in my heart. But I actually think I would love to talk a little bit and even just hear a little bit. I know we kind of heard about your focus on the game, but what I'd like to hear from both Coop and Matt, really about what brought the games to fruition. So Coop, you and I have had this chat, so it won't be news for me, but maybe for everyone else who's here, would love to hear a little bit more about how Last Remains came to be. And I know obviously Larry had a lot to do with it, but how to come into fruition, why horror, and when that was obviously brought up, why did it, of course, come to Last Remains? How did Last Remains come out of that decision?
Yeah, I believe the inspiration came from a lot of the zombie movies that were coming out during the pandemic. There's some really good stuff, that I won't name drop a bunch of them, but yeah, I think that is probably where the inspiration came, and then this is really Larry's story that we're telling because Larry started playing a lot of stealth games. He went through a stealth game phase. So kind of combine horror with stealth, but then he's also into the battle royale kind of phase as well, or genre. Then that's where everything kind of came together and where it started from. I don't know why it got so graphic. I don't know where that got from, but it started.
COVID.
Yeah, it's probably COVID. You know, just letting out that stress. But yeah, man, it's yeah, that's pretty much how it started.
Yeah, I love it. I think from where it started, because I remember I got involved with it very early on and started testing the game out when it was still awesome, but very, very raw. And it's gone so far since then. So I'm really excited. And we even have a playtest happening just this weekend too. So I'm really excited to get everybody an opportunity to come get their hands on it again. Because I know, Coop, we have some really big announcements coming up in the next month or so. So we're getting to a very, very exciting point in Last Remains development and Last Remains access. Cannot wait to share more with you guys. But Matt, I'd love to give you a chance to, like, what was really the inspiration for Last Resort? How did it come to be? Was it just a project that came up in the moment? Was it something you wanted to build for many years? Like, tell us about it. I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Well, for us, it's slightly different. The genre or the context was not the first thing we had in mind. The first thing we had in mind was really Web3. What does it bring, and how can we best address it? So, what game should we make if we want to explore all the Web3 new capabilities? And that's how we came to the genre of survival, because it really helps. It really helps using that kind of context to justify a lot of the mechanics we want to have. So limited edition, limited content. This is due to surplus gears that the military had at the beginning. Then we have something going from martial law to democracy. And this is really the decentralization of the economy. And then same thing for governance. You know, it starts with martial law, and then you get to have governance in the game. So all the concepts could be tied up to the story, and we felt this was one of the best way we could think of to have that in the game. And then we were also looking for games where we could have smart contracts and use them and have some elements on the blockchain. And we found that with crafting and lending, which are really core in a lot of the survival genre. So that's how we came to this one. And then having it accessible, having it controller based, like supporting controllers, making sure we can support plenty of different platforms. So everything kind of lined up.
Nice. I can definitely appreciate that. I think that there's just so much. Oh, give me one moment here. I think I'm getting rugged. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Perfect. Sorry, I was getting a little bit of feedback on my mic. It might just be technical. Anyway, I think it's fantastic how intentional everything was. I remember the first time you were telling me about the system, Matt. I had a lot of appreciation for how intentional it was. I think that's something that game development sometimes lacks. And no matter the genre, I really appreciate when somebody has a lot of intention behind the finer details, because I'm the kind of person that'll look at that and appreciate it. Maybe it's because I worked for Mercedes for so many years and the Germans have pumped it into my head. I don't know why, but I appreciate the little details for sure. But I think one of the things I want to talk about, especially since we have Jim Kieran up here, would be I really want to get your guys' feedback on where things go from here. Like, I think when it comes down to horror games in general, and I'll just speak from my own opinion, maybe you guys have different, but I think one of the routes that it's taken is there's a couple of different avenues. There's your traditional indie horror, which will always have a place in the market. I feel like no matter what, if you're somebody who's just trying to make a scary game and you throw something out there and one good creator plays it and they got good feedback on it, boom, all of a sudden you're an indie horror dev and let's see what you can do with it. But I think a lot of the times people have gotten into this obsession of realism and graphical quality when it comes to horror games. Everybody's trying to make, the most high quality graphical horror game out there. And I think that this is a really big focus right now for the horror genre and like some of the major ways that people look at the genre. Web3 is a whole nother element. Like Web3 adds so much more to the picture. And, there's some people who might think, hey, you're already building in such a niche genre such as horror. Why also make it even more niche with Web3? But I personally think where there is risk and where there is difficulty, there is opportunity. So I do think it's a good genre myself. But I want to know what you guys think about the future of that. And maybe, Jim Kieran, I'll let you jump in and chat a little bit first here. But great thing to think about when you give me a response here is I'd also like to know, especially as a gamer, like what kind of things maybe would you like to see be developed in the future of horror games or the horror games to come? But feel free to mention what you were going to say first, but I'd love for you to transition into that because I want to hear your opinion on it.
So, Puppet Combo, if you're not familiar with them, they are an indie horror dev that absolutely popped off. They are not high graphic fidelity. They are not amazing, like AAA Unreal 5 type of graphics. In fact, they went the retro route. You're looking at more like the PS1 era type of horror. And even Markiplier has played their games on stream, and they've absolutely done very well for themselves. So I don't think that is necessarily the route every horror game will need to take, thankfully. And also getting repetitive, that's the big issue with horror. I feel like is we haven't really evolved the horror genre too much. We started to see it with games like Amnesia, where they moved away from the Resident Evil, like here's your ammo and go kill some zombies, try to beat the final boss, blah blah blah. And that was great, but now we're looking for the next evolution of horror, because the perfect example I give people is Dead Space. When I played the first one, it terrified the heck out of me. All the jump scares, the setting, the art, like everything was aligned very well to keep me on edge and scare me, right? But by the time I got to Dead Space 3, I had the game down in my head. I knew where the jump scares were going to be. I knew what the enemies were going to do. I knew how to handle pretty much any situation that was thrown my way. And it wasn't really scary at that point. It was more like just an action horror game. And that's what we're missing, right? If I play the latest Resident Evil, it feels just like the 20 Resident Evils before. I love the series. I'm going to continue buying them and playing them, but I do want something new. And I actually posted years ago on Twitter that I think Capcom should use the Resident Evil franchise to create a Resident Evil battle royale. Now, hear me out. Not, I guess nowadays we're calling them extraction shooters, but think about it. You get dropped with all these other players in Raccoon City or wherever, and you're having to fight zombies. You're competing for resources. You have to fight against other players for those resources. So you're not just worrying about the PvE element in that type of horror. You also have the anxiety of, oh my God, is this player going to come kill me? Should I kill them first? Do we work together? It adds a whole new social layer of horror, right? So I think, and that's probably why I love Last Remains. I'm going to be completely honest, is you guys basically took my idea and made it a reality, and I love it. So I'm absolutely looking forward to how we continue to evolve this genre. But I don't know. To me, it's just that's my thing with horror right now is everything feels like the same stuff that I've played for the last 20 years. And we need something fresh. We need something new. We need Last Remains to like really pop off and show people that there is more to the horror genre that can be done. It's not just what we've put up with or accepted for the last 20 years. And these remakes coming from Capcom, love myself a good remake. Resident Evil 2's remake was phenomenal, but the Resident Evil 3 remake fell flat, right? So even remakes are a 50-50 crapshoot at this point. We need new, fresh ideas, and we're not getting that from Web 2. Enter Web 3. Well, guess what? Now I'm putting my equipment on the line every time I go out in Last Remains, right? I may lose everything. That's a whole nother form of horror, right? Now I'm sitting here terrified. Oh my gosh, all the gear I took into this round, I could lose it if I screw up. So I feel like we're doing what I've wanted the horror genre to do, and it's happening right here only in Web3. So whether or not Web3 is a benefit, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a gamer at the end of the day. I'm not a crypto bro. I'm not going to be like Web3 solves everything, but I'm here for unique games. And a lot of the Web3 studios here understand that just copying Web2, slapping Web3 on it isn't going to work. So that's why we're getting these unique ideas from Web3.
Yep, and we're going to keep trying to do it because if we can't deliver a unique idea on top of technology that already has taboo, I don't think there's any future for us. So I think everybody has upped the difficulty level, but is very much ready to take it. Well said, Jinkir, and I really appreciate that feedback. And it's funny. I'm such a big fan of Resident Evil. I still think it's good too, but I can 100% agree that after the Res 2 remake, I didn't even consider the Resident Evil 3 remake. I was like, all right, you hit me with 2 in a row? Like, not going to happen. So definitely feel that as well. So
I gotta say though, man, that Dead Space, when you're talking about that, I went through the whole series, 100% agree. But I gotta mention that eye scene, man, when they had that little needle that went into the eye, that got me jumping out of my seat for sure.
That was nuts. I agree. I think Dead Space does definitely keep the iconic set. Like, it's an iconic horror game in its own way too, but I can agree. It never changed. It really didn't. I remember the first time I picked up Dead Space 2, I was like, everything even looks the same. Like, what's different here? I'm just continuing the first game, and it was okay from that point. But yeah, three definitely didn't get me at all. But it did have some good stuff. It also had really, really good gore. I felt like they did a good job with it. But anyway, yeah, no, I want to continue on though and hear more feedback on what the future of the horror genre looks like in Web3, because I think there's still so much that can be said about it. So, Coop, anything else you want to say about the future of horror games in Web3? Maybe a little bit about Last Remains, maybe some stuff that you've been thinking about. Who knows? I leave it open to you. But any thoughts on the future of Web3 horror games?
Yeah, I mean, just the two pieces, I guess, when what gets kind of scary in Last Remains, aside from everything you said just now, like touched my heart. That was awesome. Is the darkness, the real time lighting, and just not knowing when, like, what the hell is in there, and then sometimes you see somebody, you're like, oh shit, I got to turn off my flashlight so they don't see me. It's like it's crazy, like the little like moments that you get into while you're walking around it when it's dark. I mean, sometimes it's so dark. Like I'm like, dude, do I need to like turn on a light or something? Because I can't see anything on my screen. Like it gets really immersive. So yeah, it's getting good. So that's probably the horror side of it. In terms of, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's all I'll share for that.
Coop, it made me think of that one time we were playtesting, and me and Oriole were trying to team up, and you were tracking us in the dark, trying to kill us. And then the zombies who were chasing us, we ditched through the window, and all three of them turned on you. And I just hear you going, "Oh shit, that didn't work." And I'm like, just free.
Yeah.
I think I still got the clip. That was so good. I couldn't imagine what you were going through. It was pitch black in there. How'd you see anything without a flashlight on, or were you just tracking our flashlights?
Yeah, I could see ahead where your flashlights were, and I was just running in the dark towards you until you hopped over that wall, man. And then I guess I didn't see the three zombies you guys were running from. You guys were really quiet.
Guess not. No. Oh, that was funny. That was really good. I enjoyed that. I can't wait for more of those moments. I think a really big thing is definitely that balance of emotion too. I think one thing to bring up here, I'd love to get you guys' feedback on this. And then Matt, don't worry, I'd love for you to chat too. I know I'm chatting a lot here, but what do you guys think about the dynamic between single player horror games, which are very much the majority of horror games, if you ask me? I think most horror games are single player. They're story based, they're linear, and then multiplayer horror games. So I think there's some really like games that you would think would be so scary, like Dead by Daylight. I think is a game that just like grabs some of the scariest pop culture horror elements, puts them together, but like the game itself almost has this arcadey feel to it because of the multiplayer to it. Even Friday the 13th, I think they've done things like this. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about multiplayer versus single player? Matt, maybe we'll get your opinion on this because you're definitely building something that's a little bit more dynamic. Multiplayer versus single player horror games, do you think it's going to pan out similar in Web3, or do you think it'll be primarily multiplayer because of the dynamic of Web3 token economies?
Yeah, I really think Web3 helps with community economics. So in that sense, it's you get more gains from having a multiplayer experience than you would with Web2. And so in that sense, I feel like we should expect more multiplayer experiences for that genre. And in our case, we're doing both collaborative work. So really like in most of your adventures, you're going to be in a group of 4, and it's collaborative. But then we're planning on having PvP if you choose so by going further away from the central point, which is safe. So if you stay close to the central point, you'll meet other people that are helping you, or you'll meet zombies. But if you go further away, now you can meet some people who live in a different town and they are not friendlies. And this is where you're going to have the scare of losing your shit.
I like it. I like it a lot. It's like, I don't know what it is. All horror games seem to do this. I guess I'm going to be so used to these because I played so much Tarkov, and in Tarkov, you don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm not going to trust very many people in horror games. Kieran, you got anything you want to say on top of that?
So the dynamic between multiplayer and single player, it actually kind of deters the horror experience, at least from the games we've seen so far. And that's because when I'm playing by myself and I've got that feeling of I'm alone in this situation, it gives a much deeper vibe than, oh, I've got my friends, we're gonna go roll the game, right? So like playing 7 Days to Die, for example, if I'm playing on the server by myself, it's a lot more intense because I don't have any backup. I can't, rely on friends to help me kill the zombies come the night waves and stuff like that. But then when my friends roll in, it's like, oh guys, we got this. Just build a bunch of turrets, get your guns ready, let's go. So the way that I like, and I keep bringing up Last Remains. Sorry, you guys are doing a lot right. Um, is the fact that I don't have my groups, right? It's every man for themselves. You can work together. You might not all be able to extract together, but you can still work together to get to the end and then fight it out at the end. But for the most part, players are on their own. It's every man for themselves. It's that feeling of being in this world filled with zombies and enemy players looking to take my loot, and I've got nothing but my own skills and my own intuition to run off of, right? So I think that multiplayer can work and can benefit horror when done correctly, but right now, at least within Web 2, a lot of the games are made so much easier in multiplayer that it kind of detracts from that horror element and makes it more about the group gameplay. So I think where Web3 could benefit us is, like I mentioned earlier, now I'm putting my gear on the line. People can take my gear. They can turn around and sell it back to me, for that matter. They can literally kill me, take everything I got, and then at the end of the round, hey man, I'll sell it all back to you for $100. God dang it, So there's a lot more that can be added to this, and kind of not only encourage these social situations, but also encourage the anti-social situations where now maybe you've got bounties, like you got player bounties where, hey, go kill him, take all his gear, and I'll give you $100, right? So we have new systems that can be awakened if the players can figure out how to utilize the Web3 side a bit more to their advantage and open up new elements and scenarios that you may not have otherwise seen in a Web 2 game. Because how many Web 2 horror games do you see something like that, where you're trying to steal everybody's gear, or you're putting bounties on people, or maybe you're mercenary for hire? Somebody will pay you $50 to follow them around for the match, make sure they make it to the extraction, right? You can even be a mercenary or a bodyguard, something like that. There's so many new elements that could be brought in with the Web3 side that I don't even think we can realize them all just yet.
I like it. I like it a lot. I'm going to give you a slight bit of trivia, and then actually we got a question I want to make sure we hit before we finish this, and that is, well, it's not even trivia. It's actually just a little bit of a story. So we often meet the Last Remains team here. Me, Coop, the development team. We often meet like every single week to test the game. That's one of the main reasons why we continue to ship updates. It's like we don't want to get bored with the game, so we play it every single week, same time. And Coop, you could definitely vouch for this, but we have this dynamic, Jinkiran, where I am very much a solo player. Coop is very much a solo player. The couple other people we bring in to play with us are very much solo players, but our game dev team is not. And they are very, very, very mean bullies sometimes, because they will get together and they will murder you, like 3 of them, and they are all on the same side. One dude's got a shotgun. He's chasing you down, and it's just like, damn it. You just always have to watch out for this little riot crew that's rolling through the map. And it's just funny. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
That's probably, I just realized now that you said that, that's probably because we beat them in the company tournament.
You're right. I remember that. Yeah, I remember we slapped them around, and they were not able to get the bragging rights that they were after. How you guys realize that? The front end team beat the back end team, the people who build the game. That goes to show something. We had some heavy hitters on our team. I think it was Noah. Definitely it was Noah who won it for us, Coop. But actually, no, I'm pretty sure it was Felix, wasn't it? I think he was the one who won it for us. Anyway, funny stuff in the Last Remain side of things. I just wanted to share some of that with you. But guys, I have a question, and maybe, you know what? I definitely want to throw this to Coop and Matt. So Matt, I'll throw this to you first. But we got a question from Dongwoo, who's always given us fantastic questions. Dongwoo, I hope you never miss any of these, because I love your questions every time. And he specifically asked, when we're given a chance, by the way, which is, I don't know when you asked this, but I think it was a little while ago. We finally have a chance, sir. What's one feature or update that you'd like to have in your game? Assuming obviously the game is not full release yet, which none of ours are. But if you, like, time, money, anything was not an issue and you could just add a feature to your game right now, what would it be? Matt, I want to hear your point of view on this first. That'd be a really awesome feedback to get from you.
Yeah, it's a crazy good question. It sends me directly to the backlog, right? Like everything you have in the backlog, and what can you do with it? I mean, in our case, we are in like pre-alpha stage, so there are some very basic stuff that we don't have yet and that we're working on for December, including, for example, a proper crafting system. So I guess that would be it, but it's not the most exciting one, right? So it depends how I take your question. If it is, what do I wish I had now, which I don't, it would be the crafting system because it's the base of our progression. But I think the PvP in terms of the horror genre is really what I would be after, because it's one thing to prepare against a horde of different zombies and knowing how they work and organizing around them and making sure that you can survive. It's another one to be scared to meet other players who will have strategies you can't really anticipate. And that's so that would be the one I would love to have already. But it's a lot of balancing, and so we're not going to come to it before a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And yeah, I gotta say, PvP is something that really just shakes up a game. PvPvE is also a really nice system I like, hence why we have it in Last Remains. So, Coop, what about you? If you can have one thing in Last Remains right now, absolutely no development issue, no money issues, just anything in it, what would you have in it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, you said it right, Matt, with the whole infinite backlog and everything that can happen. I think in terms of what I'm really excited for is definitely once we get the bosses in there, and it's just gonna be fun. It's gonna be an experience, and it's really gonna like just do like kind of invoke like the community. Like, are you guys gonna go against it or not? Like, so it's just gonna be interesting to see how everything gets organized around it, and also just the vision of how those bosses are going to interact with the environment, and how Larry's kind of described that. We talk about it internally is amazing. So definitely excited to see a boss come to life.
I love that answer. I think I remember the first time we Easter egged it in there in that one build, and we just let people see it, and they're like, "What is this? Should I be afraid?" And like we didn't tell them. We just wanted to see what they were gonna do with the boss standing in the middle of those buildings. And then finally, I think it was Kiesel. Of course, it was Kiesel. He had the guts to just roll up there. He's like, "I'll fight this thing if it fights me back." It was pretty great. So, Jin Kieran, feel free to share your thoughts here.
So obviously I'm not building a game, but as a gamer, what I think would be really cool for multiplayer element, proximity chat. I know it's not new. I know this isn't revolutionary, but hear me out. Also, in conjunction with that, the AI ability to detect said proximity chat and start making their way towards where the noise is coming from. So if I'm talking to my teammates, I got to try and whisper, right? Keep it quiet. And if we're too loud or we make noise, then we get swarmed. I think that would be great, not just from a gameplay standpoint, but also from a content standpoint. Because imagine I'm just sitting in a room looting and having a good time being a little loot goblin. And then all of a sudden I hear a scream from the building over because somebody just got murked by a bunch of zombies. I think that would be hilarious. So I think proximity chat and AI detection of that proximity chat would be fantastic adds to the horror genre.
You know, Jin Kieran, I don't know if you've heard of it. You've probably seen it, but it reminds me of the multiplayer in Silence mod. I don't know if you've seen it be played, but it is hilarious watching a bunch of people. If you've never seen In Silence, it's a game where the monster hears you. It is a pretty scary looking monster, by the way. There's also obviously like Iowoki and stuff, but this one's fun because they made it multiplayer. And yes, it is a bunch of people running around screaming, and the monster in this case is actually another player. And every time you're screaming and yelling or making any noise, he can hear you and he tracks you. So it's really funny. It's also funny because he can't see. So even if a player runs by and can hear you, you guys could just like be running around and he can't quite catch you. Funny game. I highly recommend you go check it out. But I think that would be an awesome element in Last Remains. And who knows, maybe you've given us some inspiration, so maybe me and Coop can think about it. But I think that would be an awesome thing to add into. But guys, we're coming to the end of this. We always do these for an hour. You know, we like to keep it short and sweet. I'm now in Asia, so it's middle of the night for me. So Coop, I'm in the same boat as you, having to go late into the night to get these done. But I do just want to mention one more time, and of course, I'll give everybody a chance to say goodbye. But I definitely like to give myself and then, of course, Matt a chance to talk a little bit about what's coming up and what's happening with our games. So I want to remind everybody once again. about a few things that are happening here. First off, Last Remains equipment mint. So this is happening right now. We have the whitelisted equipment minting happening right at the moment. It's all free. So again, this is the free equipment. It's not the Genesis equipment, which will be very exclusive for Genesis holders only. But this is the equipment going on right now. So if you have any character NFTs, I believe you are whitelisted for it. Head over to the Earn Alliance rocket launcher, and you'll be able to participate in that. Just finish the missions. Very simple. Just make sure that you're supporting and following us. Have your wallet connected, and you can get your equipment NFTs. I also want to make a really big announcement because we also have, with Last Resort here, we have a badge actually minting, and it starts on the 27th, which I believe is, well, today for Asia, but tomorrow for most other people. The badge will be actually minting tomorrow at 1 o'clock UTC. So you guys, if you have not yet, go ahead, Coop.
I was gonna say, and I gotta say, I love our badges biasly, but I have to say, Last Resort's badge is probably one of my top favorite ones. It looks so sick.
I appreciate you bringing that in because I have to agree. Did you? No, it looks fantastic. I love it because it's got such a good. Yeah. Anyway, I can say as much as I want about it, but you know what? I'm not going to say anything more because if you are interested, you guys are going to have to head over to the Earn Alliance page and you're going to have to mint it for yourselves. So make sure that you guys are following both Last Resort and Earn Alliance. While you're there, obviously, follow Last Remains too. If you guys aren't following us, what are you doing? And then make sure that you're able to stay up to date with everything because we will be announcing everything and having official links. You guys know, be careful. Don't sign anything that is not an official link from the official page. And even then, make sure that you think twice. Don't want to see anybody having any issues in the bear market here. So yeah, just wanted to mention that, let everybody know. So again, Last Remains equipment mint happening. Last Resort badge is happening actually tomorrow. So make sure you guys keep your eyes open for that. And other than that, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed being able to chat with everyone up here. It was very conversational on a topic that I absolutely love, and I think it's made me realize we maybe have to come together to have a potential horror game play night in the Last Remains community. That's not even Last Remains. Maybe we'll shake it up a bit and play some other games. But thank you guys all for being up here. I'll give you guys a chance to say goodbyes, but on my end, we're signing out here. So thank you guys once again, Coop, Jinkiran, Matt from Last Resort. Thank you guys so much, and everybody who's listening as well. Thank you guys. Have a great day or night.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night. Have a good day, everyone.